Free Word Centre. My name is Lucy Greaves. I'm one of the two translators in residence here at the moment. And this event this evening is part of the Translators in Residence programme. So thank you for coming and thank you to Free Word for offering this space for us to be here and to talk about these two wonderful books that we've got this evening. So we're going to be talking about the Book of Rio, published by Press, and the Football Crónicas from Marques Press. And with me this evening, we've got Toni Marques. I've got their biographies here. I'm just going to read it out because I don't know it off by heart.
It'll take 3 seconds.
Nice and quick.
Tweet.
So Toni is a former New York correspondent for a global newspaper and a story editor for Fantastical, a leading weekly news show at TV Global, where he's worked since 2007. And he's currently the curator of FLUP, the first and only international literary festival hosted by shantytown communities in Brazil. He has published 4 books, and 2 of his short stories have been published in French by Edition Antoine. Toni is one of the editors for the Book of Rio. And next to him is Jethro Soutar. Jethro is a translator of Spanish and Portuguese and an English writer, and he has co-edited the Football Crónicas, and he's also translated one of the stories for the Book of Rio. He's written 2 works of non-fiction with a Latin American theme, both have been published by Anova Books, and he's translated Argentinian and Brazilian crime fiction for the British Press. And his translation of By Night the Mountain Burns by Juan Tomás Ávila Lauren will be published by Andela Stories in late 2014. And as I said, he's co-editor of the Football Crónicas. And we will hopefully have a third speaker, hence the empty chair there. One of the authors who's contributed to the Football Crónicas is running slightly late, he may be stuck in traffic. So
I think Penn always have an empty chair, don't they, to highlight authors who can't be present due to political reasons. So let's pretend it's a lot.
Let's pretend that's it.
And when he rushes in,
yeah.
Both ways.
Yeah. So fingers crossed, Diego will make it at some point. Great. So welcome everyone. I just thought we could start talking about kind of how these books have come about, their genesis, and a little bit about why short stories and why their kind of power in Latin America. So do you want to start by just telling us how the Football Crónicas came to be?
I will. It's an unusual story, I suppose, in that we had an idea, decided to do it, set up a publisher, and here it is. So how it all began was co-editor here, Tim Gervin, who will be doing a reading with me in a bit. Travels a lot to Latin America, does a lot of reading, and he was coming across a lot of very good writing of what we call chronicas. Chronica is not it does exist in English, but it's a bit more of a considered form, if you like, in Latin America, where it's a journalism but told as a story, so we might call it narrative non-fiction, creative non-fiction. The idea being facts are facts, but it's told creatively, it's told to sort of engage the reader, it's told as a story, as a narrative. And he kept finding lots of good ones. And with the World Cup on the horizon, with football being such a big thing in Latin America, obviously a lot of people had written ones with a football theme. And we decided to combine that and try and come up with something in time for the World Cup, sort of capitalise on interest there. Football, I think, in Latin America, allows you to engage with lots of different themes. So the idea of the book is that it's not necessarily about football, but a football fan should enjoy it in the same way that a non-football fan would. So maybe using football to get readers to engage with topics they wouldn't ordinarily read about. So he was finding these great pieces. What do we do next? We didn't really know, so we were sort of making it up as we went along. We started contacting the authors and saying, hi, we're 2 guys who wondered about translating these things and making them into the book, and they were like, yeah, great. They appreciate the interest, and for a Latin American author to have a piece translated into English is quite good for them in a sort of calling card way. They can use that to try and interest publishers around the world. English ones, of course, English language ones, but any country will often use English as a sort of for a sample. So yeah, we started contacting people, they started being enthusiastic, gradually began to take shape. We couldn't afford to pay for these things, so we thought the best way of sort of A, setting out our stall as it wasn't a commercial operation, and B, sort of creating a spirit of giving something back to Latin America. We made it a charitable, not-for-profit project. So authors gave permissions for us to publish their translations for free. Translators work for free, me and Tim work for free. On the production side, the design, the typesetting, everyone worked for below their usual rates to try and make it as cheap as possible. We tried to interest publishers, and a lot of them liked the idea and thought it would probably make an interesting book, but not a commercially viable one. And that's the nature of the game. It's a kind of odd book about an odd form of writing with unknown sort of authors there. So we decided just to do it ourselves, give it a go. We thought this sort of day and age, you can do things a bit differently. Maybe you don't need the traditional structures of getting into bookshops and things. You can find your audience, social media, online, things to find people who'd be interested, and hopefully, eventually, word of mouth, and we'll be in Waterstones, etc. And also to raise the funding, somebody sent me a Kickstarter crowdfunding thing for another project, and I suddenly went, this could work for us. So yeah, we did a crowdfunding campaign. You could either pre-order the book, so that sort of gave us the confidence and the capital to move ahead, or we arranged various other things as a five-a-side game you could participate in, up to you could buy your name into one of the stories, and so there was a whole range of things. And people, it was great. Apart from the money we raised, the sort of level of enthusiasm and support really gave us the sort of confidence to move forward, set up a company, found a publisher, published a book, and here we are, presenting it. So that's the story of the Football Crónicas.
Okay, so because Coma Press is a non-profit publishing house as well, you can consider yourself as a non-profit audience, okay? Which is very good nowadays with the credit crunch and everything else, and Latin American turmoil. So, well, my story, I'm here thanks to that lady there, Katie Slade. She works for Coma Press, she's the co-editor of the book, and I have a less idealistic or more mundane reason to be here. I work as a curator of this festival. Some people here, my friends, have been there. We are in the third edition. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 alumni from Fluke Festival, which makes me very, very happy. Because I work with that festival, we are an international literary festival. I work very closely with the British Council. The British Council sent me in 2012 to Norwich to an event called Norwich Showcase. The idea was to showcase British literature for lots of foreign delegates, as they call us. And at that place, I met a Palestine poet, Najwan Darwish. Najwan referred to the Salon de Louvre of Algeria, my name, and then I went to Algeria. Several months later, in Algeria, I met a Polish translator who happens to be the translator for Polish to Hassan Blassin. I brought Hassan Blassin last year to Fluke, and then Hassan Blassin told my name to Katie. Would you like to organize a book? And so it was a chain of events. Coma Press does something very, very unique, I guess. In Brazil, we have nothing like that. I mean, we have a series in a mainstream publishing house of Brazilian writers living abroad for a while in a sort of scholarship and writing books about that experience. But other than that, I'm not really aware of publishing houses doing something like that. So in Coa Press, they have this series of city books. In fact, city and country books. In fact, tonight, if you want to flee, now it's going to be the time for this best event. They are having Gaza, the Book of Gaza, being launched today, and luckily, Coma Press works with short stories. That's why they are non-profit, of course, because Brazil, the short story is it has become again a very vibrant scene for emerging writers and for well-established writers. We have as well the chronicle tradition with huge names that started to show up. Well, actually, in the turn of the century, 19th century to 20th century, I'm thinking about Machado de Assis, right? Mm-hmm. And later in the 50s, we had this startling, brilliant generation of chronicle writers, and newspapers keep publishing this format, so to speak, but without the very same quality we used to have back in those old days, because those guys were geniuses. That's the reason. You need a couple of generations until another genius show up. And with the short story, we are having this new boom, this renewal boom. And what we tried to achieve here was really some sort of a collection of stories that, in the main sense, the city of Rio de Janeiro somehow marks the way people relate to themselves, the characters relate to themselves, and the way they relate to Brazilian history and to what it's like to be a Brazilian. So we start with relationships, personal relationships, and as well relationships, professional relationships, the way they are marked by history in the making, ongoing history, and I'm talking obviously about the military dictatorship, and gradually the stories shift to personal relationships marked by Rio de Janeiro city stuff, which you can guess come out as a messy relationship thing. So that's the whole broad spectrum here.
Thank you very much. It's fascinating. You mentioned earlier about this kind of new wave of kind of new boom of short fiction in Brazil, and how you felt there were different voices coming through in terms of the narrators and protagonists of these stories. Could you just tell us a little bit about that?
That's true. I have to mention first, there is a scholar in Brazil, her name is Regina Dal Castanhe from the University of Brasilia. Brasilia is our capital. Who has been mapping out the average, not the average, she's doing statistical stuff actually. She's mapping out who are the protagonists of mainstream Brazilian novels, starting with the late 50s, early 60s. Her criteria is mainstream publishing houses that are able to distribute books all over Brazil. We don't have as many bookshops as we need. We are a very big country. We have 5,500 cities, and we don't have bookshops in every city. But anyway, so she established this criteria, and she has been learning, and well, for me, quite an absurd fact out of the mapping she has been doing. 2/3 of the protagonists or narrators of Brazilian novels from mainstream publishing houses are what? White, male, middle-class writers. So talk about diversity? No, I'm not talking about diversity. I'm talking about a boring scenario here. It's very boring. If you want to read a book about, the hero is a nuclear engineer go to I don't know, American fiction. And while in the short story panorama, the short story scene, we have a lot of diversity. The major Brazilian publishing houses are not very they are not very keen to publish short stories. I think this happens nearly everywhere. But smaller houses, they are publishing a lot. And in those books, you see quite a diversity. Unfortunately, for several reasons, we couldn't find favela writers, shantytown writers, slum writers, emerging shantytown writers to have in this book here. The festival I work for is doing a serious work with them. We have a process of selecting and submitting those writers to lecturings and panels with major Brazilian writers, with major figures within the book publishing industry in Brazil, and finally publishing them in short story collections and poetry collections. We have published 4 books so far. But to me, they are still in baby steps, in terms of a broader scope of dominating, conquering the literary technique and so on. That's why they are not here in this book. But anyway, I think the diversity panorama of the short story scene eventually will reach a day that we will have as readers, a generation of favela writers writing favela stuff or not. When we bring them to those workshops and stuff, we don't tell them, hey, you should write about favelas. In fact, we tell them, if you want to write science fiction that has Tokyo as a scenario, go on. You don't have to be branded as a favela writer. But this is something we lack in Brazil, But we lack some stuff as well. And this is going to be the ending of my answer here. Now, this is something very serious. I was mentioning the diversity issue here. When you try to sort out the dominant class, the wealthy class, in current Brazilian letters, you won't find, unless you are looking for caricature. Brazil has a problem. Brazilian writers, they're still stuck to the middle class aspirations, middle class anxieties, and hopefully the new generation of short story writers, some of them are represented here in this book, will free themselves from that, middle class straitjacket.
Which I think that's something you definitely see in the Book of Rio, is that there's a real multiplicity of voices from people from all sorts of different classes, men, women. Although there are only two women writers in the book, there are lots of female voices in the narrators, and I think that's a really exciting thing about it. So I'm sure we'll look forward to reading that, I hope. Jethro, one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of the Football Crónicas is that it's obviously there's a lot of football in there, and it's enjoyable for a reader who is into football anyway, but for somebody like me who was a staunch Liverpool fan when I was about 9 years old, but haven't really been into football since then, it's still a really fascinating read. And I think that's because there's football on one level, but then there's a wealth of the social and political context kind of underneath that and entwined within it, and they're kind of inseparable.
I think in many ways we've pulled a fast one. It's not really about football at all, but that's the way of drawing people in. Now, of course, in Latin America, football is a great way of addressing many issues. Another motivation for doing this book, if you like, is that me and Tim, we do like football. We're a little bit sick of it in the last few years, but we do like football. We love Latin America. But whenever you read about football in Latin America by be it British writers or outsiders, it's very cliched and hyperbole, whereas people writing from the inside. Ah.
Welcome, glad to be here.
They understand what I was saying, that the football is important and can allow you to speak about other things, but they don't, you know, there's an authenticity that you don't get otherwise. So that's part of the point. To go back to your sort of short stories, I mean, in the chronicle form is a kind of blending of fact and fiction, which seems to work very well in Latin America. If you think of magical realism, for example, this idea that, you know, truth is stranger than fiction in Latin America, and maybe that's why the combined format works as a chronicle. But as we went on finding the chronicles, we also kept finding short fiction, because as you said, there's a lot of good stuff going along, and we were like, oh, I wish we could include this. And they were like, we can't, it's not a book. Which is where Diego came in. So I contacted Diego. I'd read a story of his about, which he'd written a while ago, but we're revising. So he said, yeah, I'm interested, but let me re-go over it. And should we get him to say a little bit about it? Or?
Yes, please.
Well, no, about the story and when you wrote it and why. Maybe.
First of all, I'm really sorry. I just came from Cambridge. It was raining. It was terrible. It was really heavy. So I wrote that short story. Came out in 2001, and of course my accent is from the United States because I lived in the United States for 11 years. So if you don't understand anything that I say, I can repeat it. It's basically about soccer or football and violence in the country. So it's about this football player who becomes actually a delinquent, it's mixing. There's a radio that's going on all the time, and it's actually it's live with a game of my own team, which is Universitario de Deportes, which is La U, and that match actually happened, and we won, and it's historical for us. But what I really tried to do was like mixing everything related to popular culture. I was very influenced by this author from Argentina. His name is Manuel Puig. I don't know if you have heard about him, but it's a great writer. And it's called, in Spanish, it's La Peste y el Fútbol. And Jethro did a wonderful job, and it's called Football and Plague in English. And I always try to mix in my work everything that is related to things like a neighborhood, realistic literature, and also the popular culture. And I love soccer. I'm actually really surprised sometimes when I meet other writers who are very deep and you know, they look like hippies and they cross the legs, and I look like a boxer, you know. So people, when I tell them that I'm a writer, actually they said like, no man, you're kidding. You don't look like a writer. And I actually don't look like a writer, but I am a writer. So things that I normally when I was I grew up in this this neighborhood from a middle class, low middle class. It's called Magdalena del Mar. It's close to the sea, and we used to play soccer in the street. You know, that's what we used to do. And I grew up just really playing every day. I used to be better than her. And in my literature, I try to mix that. I try to incorporate that low culture, and that's what Puig did. You know, he mixed things like what you can hear from the radio or from a magazine or for everything. Everything you can make literature with everything, and that was something that really impresses me because it was really great literature. And at the same time, what he was using, it was this normally known, something that is not really literature for, in that time was the writer from the boom. And Puig was basically post-boom author. And he was really into movies too. So yeah, so when Jethro sent me that email, it was a long time ago.
Right, it's been running for a couple of years.
Yeah. And I never asked you, how did you find out about that short story? Because it was published only in Lima. That then my work has been published in Spain, right now France, but that book, that particular book, was not on the internet. And actually, that's a question. How did you
I think El País had a thing about literature and football where they made up a team from Latin America.
Oh.
And I think you were only a substitute.
Yeah, I was there.
I don't know whether that was football ability or because they thought you were a boxer or like
Yeah.
I looked, we didn't have a Peruvian at that stage, and I thought we need a Peruvian. And that was the way we came around to it. Did you have a question you wanted to ask? Or
I was thinking it would be good to hear some of the story, if you're up for...
Yeah. You don't have it in Spanish, I presume. Back pocket.
You want me to?
Yeah, we're going to do a reading of your story.
Yeah, perfect.
We're going to do it in Spanish, but I'm not sure I've got it.
So we'll just switch to English, that's fine.
Yeah.
Tim is going to come and add another voice, because there are several voices in the story.
We're going to read it together. I'll explain it. So, I'll tell you how we're going to do it. I'm going to read the narration. Tim's going to read the voice, and you do the radio.
Perfect.
Okay? Do you need to?
Yeah.
You need this?
Yeah, I'll have another copy.
Great. So, this is...
Don't go too far.
I feel like a rock star.
So yeah, this is sort of halfway through the short story. To set the scene a little bit, there's lots of voices that blend in and out. We're in a car. I don't think we need to say much more than that. Ricardo stares absent-mindedly at the beer advertisements on the side of the motorway, playing back his family history, the financial hardship of his youth, the comfort and excess of later years. How did we get from there to here? Because of Papa. As a journalist, he was a mediocre writer, but he had a knack for scoops and headlines. He was sly too. He knew which doors to knock on, and he understood when times were tough and it was best to do as you were told, keep your head down. He knew having principles became a burden if you found yourself out of work or under threat. Alberto Venero never spent long on any one newspaper, but he never lacked for work either. They were still living in the prefab on Calle 6 de Agosto in Jesus Maria when they got the news that would change their lives. It was a Wednesday in April 1994, a year before the president's re-election. That was the day Ricardito heard the name for the first time, La Yuca. His father said it, then fell about laughing, as if it was some kind of joke. I'm the new editor-in-chief of La Yuca, a sensationalist tabloid, one of those 50-cent rags bankrolled by businessmen linked to Fujimori. La Yuca used its headlines to discredit anyone who opposed the regime, paving the way for re-election. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, son, that's all. There were difficult times. I accepted their offer and I think I did the right thing. I did it for you guys. You don't understand that. You're incapable of putting yourselves in my shoes. You're a spoilt brat. Don't raise your voice at me, you ungrateful little runt. How the fuck do you think we could afford university? Without La Yuca, listen carefully to what I'm saying, without that bullshit rag of a newspaper, there'd be no food on the table. Never mind the Volvo, the beach house, the little trips to Miami you were so fond of. There'd have been fuck all. Think about that next time you show your father a lack of respect.
What's with you, all deep in thought, Ricardo?
Venero asks suddenly, snapping Ricardo out of his dreamy recollections.
You're away with the fairies, son.
Oh, nothing, Papa, nothing.
Did he take a swing at him, Alejandro? Did he really just suck him on, just like that? Unbelievable. Carranza, the Puma, has just assaulted Soria. The youngster is laid off flat on the ground. Outrageous. That's a red card if I saw one, Mr. Arana. And here he comes now. He calls Carranza over. The Crystal players are understandably livid. And, well, it's good night, Carranza.
That kid's landed you in the shit here, Ricardo.
Pinero says mockingly.
Like, ooh, fuck now, son. You've had it.
But wait a minute, what? I can't believe it. I won't believe it. Right, that's it. I'm out of here. Who wants to commentate on the rest of the game? Elejalder? You want to take the meat, Rory? How about you, Don Vides? I can't believe it. Incredible. He's let him off the hook. What a disgrace, Arana. I don't want to tell you how to do your job, Delfino, distinguished member of the FA, but this is scandalous. No, I'm out of here. Come on, who's gonna commentate?
Hear that? Hear that, son? This wrestling motherfucker, a bastard thief.
No, Papa, not a real thief, Ricardo thinks right away. And it's as if a lid blows off the pressure cooker inside him. The real thieves are the bastards you defend in your newspaper, who are fleeing the country right now, weighed down with cash. The real thieves are you and your bosses and your bosses' bosses. And me, I'm a thief. I, who marched through the streets protesting against the government that paid my university fees while you spat out lies in your newspaper.
Hey, lad, cat got your tongue? It's half time. That ref just gifted you the game and you sit there in silence like an idiot? What's the matter? What's on your mind? Ricardo? Birds? Studies? The beers you're going to have to buy me when Silver starts banging them in? Hear what I said? The blind bat's going to make changes. He'll bring Silver on for that second half. He better do anyway. Hey, Ricardo, are you going to fucking answer me or what?
Sorry, Papa. I was thinking about something else.
Well, keep your shit together with you, son. Hang on. What are you doing? Oh, I told you not to go through Apocongo, for fuck's sake. Now look, you've got a slap bang in the middle of a fuck-off traffic jam, and right in front of me some fucking new build estate full of jobs.
It's just a little hold-up, Papa. It'll clear in no time.
Clear in no time, my ass. We're going to be here for hours. We fucked it. We'll never make the second half.
And everyone in that fucking new build estate full of yobs, read your newspaper, Papa.
Listen, you little shit. Don't fucking start with that now.
Look out, Cristal. I'm sorry. Look out. Cristal are peeling forward. La U are defending desperately. Ferrari to Soto, Soto to Hidalgo, Hidalgo to Noriega. It's a sky blue tidal wave. La U down to 10 men show their teeth, bare their claws, sharpen their nails, cling to their 2-minute lead. 5 minutes in the second half, ladies and gentlemen, and it's chaos in the university penalty area. There's pushing and shoving and holding. Here comes Julinho with a first shot, half shaped by Ibanez, but Hidalgo bounces on the rebound, hits his full blast, goal. Goal! Goal! Goal!
Pinero shouts triumphantly over and over again, sticking his head out of the window.
Goal for Sporting Cristal.
Sorry, I forgot to give the strong language warning before that. No, it's happened now anyway. Thank you for your reading, guys. Diego, I was just interested, could you explain what the peste, the plague of the title is?
Well, I think it's talking about all the political situation. This particular book, it's a short story collection, but all the short stories are linked. So it could be read as a novel too. It has the same characters. They're crossing the short stories, and it's happening during the 90s, which is the time of dictatorship in Peru. And Benero, who is the father, is working for one of these tabloids who made like a lot of money. So La Peste is basically alluding to that situation in which young people, like the soccer players or like the guys, the friends from the neighborhood, are growing. During that time, they're growing, and what they had. It's actually the time when I was growing. And my friend who's there, Fernando, who's Peruvian too, it was growing, and for us it was very difficult because what we had inside the neighborhood was a reflection of what's happening outside the neighborhood, and that's what I call the plague. The plague is that situation.
Thank you very much. I think we should hear hear some from the Book of Rio as well. So we thought for this story we would have a bit of some of the Portuguese and I'll read some of the English. So do you want to take it away?
Okay.
You can stay seated if you prefer. You don't have to.
I'm afraid of the whiting.
You're a bit tangled there.
Yeah, but before, excuse me, before starting here, I mentioned earlier that 5 people here went to the festival I work for. There's a 6th up there, and forgive me for that, okay? The spotlight makes me a little bit star blind. So thank you. Okay, so this is a story by Elvira Vinha, and she may be, for those of you who are aware of the recent history of Brazilian literature, she can be seen somehow influenced by our great Clarice Lispector, a woman that in the 50s was our response, our Lumi response to Virginia Woolf, okay? And she was Ukrainian, she was in Brazil, and that's another whole panel, another story whatsoever. So, we are having here this, talking about Lumi, this atmosphere of a couple, we're not sure if this is...
It's kind of, it's a story that's difficult to pin down. It's whether we're present day or past, or whether these people are actually there or not, or if they're together or not, it's all left unclear. So that's kind of the...
And so, well, you see for themselves as in English. I read it in Portuguese. The name is Lugares no Meio de Tudo. Dessas lojas de moda com vitrines de camisas com gola em V, justinhas, que consideram ser a marca registrada dos jovens atléticos de sucesso. Acham, desconfiam. Esses jovens somos nós todos, mesmo os de nenhum sucesso e bem pouca juventude. Seríamos o mesmo grupo. Eles, o nosso verdadeiro eu. Eles, a nossa sombra a nos acompanhar sempre com suas cores, seus bíceps. Enquanto andássemos como andamos pelas ruas sozinhos, barrigudos e infelizes, mas sabendo que não somos, na verdade, assim. Somos aquilo que nos acompanha, ali, furtivamente. Temos sim bíceps, barriga tanquinho, nesse nosso avesso que não é o avesso. É um nós verdadeiro, que só se mostra assim como se mostra, quase esfarrapado e caído por distração. Por falta de tempo para ver se o que deveríamos ser, a vitrine. Afinal, é uma cidade praiana, todos aqui são atléticos, somos, até por falta de alternativa. E para atléticos que se dirigem em comércio, expectativas pessoais e sociais e qualquer planejamento que envolva o futuro. Acho mesmo que comprei uma vez uma camiseta desta mesma loja, na época em que eu ainda dava presentes ou em que eu ainda achava que havia gente a quem dar presentes. Mandei embrulhar em papel brilhante, embora estivesse em liquidação e eu precisasse pagar mais pelo papel brilhante. O algodão era grosseiro, mas havia uma figura de surf na frente. O presente era para um homem pequeno e magro que ficava na areia da praia dias inteiros, falando como surfista ou como ele achava, e todos nós também achávamos, que surfistas falam. Tinha sido meu marido uma vez, quando ainda havia praia até as 6 da tarde, quando as ondas eram sempre azuis, com surfistas e ilhas ao longe. Não sei se é a mesma loja, e só me lembrei dela, na verdade, depois de ter sentado no degrau de sua porta, e de ter começado a buscar uma intimidade qualquer, ainda que inventada, um lugar que eu escolhi para acolher temporariamente minha bunda. Estava bom no degrau. Havia uma sobra do ar-condicionado que vinha lá de dentro, e uma distância suficiente entre mim e o chão. Mas as lojas se confundem, todas estão iguais, de roupa ou de qualquer outra coisa. Então não sei. Havia um concerto na rua que não notei ao sentar. Preferimos não notar concertos, preferimos não admitir que, na verdade, nada nunca está pronto. Mas as batidas da marreta recomeçam. Na minha frente, para além dos cardumes de jeans e tênis a nadar na altura de meus olhos, está o café em que você um dia se sentou para esperar por sua amante. Me encontro no ponto exato da calçada em que ela, vinda pela esquerda e virando a esquina, ainda do outro lado da rua, este em que eu estou, poderia ver você antes que você a visse. O café do Leblon, com tudo que se seguiu e tudo que existiu antes, e que nos fez afinal partir. Segundo você, melhor assim.
the Book of Rio. So in English, it's called Places in the Middle of Everything. The windows of those trendy shops display the tight V-neck t-shirts they imagine as the trademark of successful, athletic young people. I guess they must think we're all the same, we're all like that, even those who lack success and have scant youth left. We're all the same to them. Those young people represent our true I. They're the shadow that follows us everywhere, flaunting their colours and their biceps, while we walk the streets alone, flabby and unhappy. But we know full well that this isn't how we are either. We're the thing that accompanies us furtively. Yes, we do have biceps and washboard stomachs in this other version of ourselves that isn't quite our opposite. It's our true us which puts on this shabby, decrepit show just for fun. Because we haven't the time to take on our true form, the shop window mannequin. After all, it's a beach city, we're all athletic here. Perhaps because we have no choice, and everything is geared towards athletic types. Marketing, personal and social expectations, any kind of plan for the future. I even think I once bought a t-shirt from this very shop, back when I still gave presents or still believed there were people I might give presents to. I asked for the t-shirt to be wrapped in shiny paper, even though it was on sale and I had to pay more for the shiny paper. The fabric was pretty poor quality, but there was a picture of a surfer on the front. The present was for a small, thin man who used to stay on the beach for days on end, talking like a surfer, or how he imagined, and we all imagined, surfers talked. He'd been my husband once, back when you could stay at the beach until 6, when the waves were always blue with surfers and islands in the distance. I have no idea if it's the same shop, and in fact, I only remembered it after I'd sat down on the step outside and began to search for some kind of intimacy, invented even, with the place I'd chosen to temporarily accommodate my bum. It was good sitting there on the step. I could feel slight gusts from the air conditioning inside, and there was sufficient distance between me and the ground. But it's easy to mistake one shop for another. They're all so alike, selling clothes or other stuff. So I don't know. There were some roadworks on the street that I hadn't noticed when I sat down. We'd rather not notice roadworks. We'd rather not admit that in fact nothing will ever be finished. But the drilling starts up again. In front of me, beyond the shoals of jeans and trainers swinging past the eye level, is the cafe where one day you sat to wait for your lover. I find myself at the exact spot on the pavement where she, approaching from your left and rounding the corner, still on the other side, my side of the road, would have been able to see you before you saw her. The LeBlanc Cafe, with everything that followed and everything that went before, that finally made us go our separate ways. It was for the best, in your opinion. I glanced over at the cafe. It was just a glance, but it helps to anchor me, sitting low down on the step in front of the shop, and almost at the same level as a smartly set little table with its 3 empty chairs. It's still early and the place is empty. I am she, my gaze is superimposed on your lover's, resting on an empty chair which I fill with movements and details I didn't see. In the absence of such images, I resort to scenes from French films, which are also more imagined than remembered. What I'm calling a present moment, for want of a better phrase, is therefore an absence, a radical one. I'm just aware that we're rapidly running out of time, so I think let's open it up to any of your questions from the audience for any of our panelists. Somebody like to kiss up? Yes. Just hang on a second, we should have a roaming mic coming down. It's on its way. Just here in the pink in the second row. Thank you.
First of all, I just want to make a comment on Toni's comment about favela writers. And I just wanted to remember that in the 60s there was a favela writer, a woman from a favela, in fact, called Carolina Maria de Jesus, who in fact who wrote a diary about her life in favela, which was translated in fact into many languages, into English. But what I always remember about Carolina, so in some ways she was a very successful author. She was discovered by a journalist. But I remember that there was, while I was in São Paulo, there was, I don't know, the 4th or 5th edition of her book was published. But none of the bookshops who normally organise the launches of books would have it, because normally books are launched with a little white wine and the author sits at the table,
Bad
signs the
white
books and
wine.
so on. Bad white wine, it has to be bad. But there was no room for Carolina to do that. So I found her standing, it was a rainy day in São Paulo, I found her standing at one of those big newspaper stands on Via Luta do Chá, under the sort of side flap of the thing. And that was the only space she had to sign her books, because she was black, she was poor, she was a woman, and she was a favelada.
Yes.
That was in the 60s, of course. I just want to say a quick word too, because
Introduce yourself.
yes, I couldn't resist making that comment. My name is Jan Rocha, I'm a journalist, and I'm sort of gate crashing this event to draw attention to the book that we have, that Latin American Bureau has just launched, which is really a revised, modernised, much updated version of the book which was originally launched in the 1990s, with a special chapter about football and also little bits about social media and all these things which didn't exist before. So I hope that, and it's an attempt to sort of explain a bit of the complexity of Brazil to people who might be going there or want to know a bit more about it. So we take in history and economics and politics and the Amazon and climate change and society and so on, but writing it, I hope, in a sort of light-hearted way. So please, I hope you'll buy it, as well as all the other books. Thank you.
And of course, what I had in my mind was a generation of favela writers. We can mention Paulo Lindsay. Some of you may know him by the City of God fame. He came from the favela as well. But when it comes about a mass movement or short story writers, in that case, we are still waiting for that to happen. But São Paulo outskirts, they have a very strong, and in Rio, not that strong, but we have it. São Paulo city, São Paulo is our richest and largest city. They have a very active scenario of spoken word, slam poetry, and they have Ferrer. Ferrer is a widely known black writer who does a wonderful job with his writing. But again, what happened to Carolina may be an indication as well that the path is harder, even if this new generation really blossom.
Thank you.
So, Comma Press, Sao Paulo edition.
That's the next one.
Any more questions for our audience?
Well, I'll say something.
Go on.
Only because I have a translation in this book and a few in this one, and they were both, the one I did for this one and the translation of Diego's were very, very difficult. The one in Rio is quite playful and doesn't write in a sort of standard form. He likes to, again, a bit like yours, it's quite ambiguous, but prefers to try and write in a way that people speak. And that's very interesting, but it was quite hard to convey. On the other hand, with Diego's, we've got historical contexts, issues and slang and football match that I'd never seen. There was a commentary on it. I was looking for YouTube clips and finding bits and pieces. References to politics, some of which I knew, some of which I had no idea about. And then the various, I suppose one of the main themes of the story is race. So you had the very different registers of words such as negro and how that was meant on the sort of streets of Lima compared to being written on the page in English. I sent you a list of about 50 questions. Yeah, this is more questions than I've ever had on a novel. I don't think I sent so many. Are all your stories like that? I mean, I mean, you said you like Italian popular culture, so.
Well, right now I'm having the same problem. Well, the same thing. I'm going over the same thing with my new novel. It's coming in French,
Okay.
and the translator is sending me 50 questions. Normally my literature deals with a lot of slang. I use a lot of slang, and different registers, and yeah, well, the answer is yes.
Yes, please.
If you've lived in the States for 11 years, how do you keep your slang?
But because every time I go anywhere, I try to look for a Peruvian friend. And well, it's not that I lived for 11 years straight. Straight, but I always came back to visit my family and friends. So, and actually, I think from the 3 novels I've read, I have written all of them, even though happens in different parts of the world, deals with politics in Peru and things that happen to me in Peru. So I'm really, really close to a lot of things that happen in my country. And actually, I was talking about that with one of my friends that even when I go to different countries where the accent is very, very, very strong, I don't know why. I feel that I have to fight against that, and I don't really know why. But I really like, I suppose, Peruvian talking. I don't know, but yeah, it's that.
Something funny about Brazil, something odd perhaps, is that fiction on football and fiction on samba is something you don't see every day being published. In fact, they are very rare. And there's a major novel that was published last year, I guess. Yeah. We have a stage play by a very famous now deceased playwright. Well, he died a long time ago. But there's a play, a political play, of all sorts. Some short stories by big names, and that's pretty much it. And movies, we have awful movies in the 80s, not really bad, like one or two. Well, we have a Pelé movie, but that was American one, with Stallone as the goalkeeper. What was the coach?
Escape to Victory.
Escape to Victory. Actually, the coach or the
He gets injured. In fact, it gets a mention in this book. It's a story about an Argentinian prison team.
And Paulo Lins, that I mentioned moments ago, his new book deals with the history of samba. I mean, it's far easier to find non-fiction about samba and soccer and football than fiction. Some people say, those are sacred subjects. They are too complex, that's bullshit, that's rubbish, sorry.
I think we're
But there were several writers that were very famous that really thought about football in the worst way. Borges, for example, right? And that is something that we normally speak a lot about. If football is really something, it's like a good subject to write about. I don't think there anything close to a bad subject for literature. I think everything could be a good subject, and football.
Yeah, in Brazil they say more. So, some people say more. It's too, it's too big. Like we have only stupid writers, that are not able to tackle a big subject. But the discussion about why there is no really good books about football is like football itself discussion.
In our forward, which is by Tim Vickery, who's a Latin American football expert on the BBC, and he's written a lovely forward, but he mentions Nelson Rodriguez, who's a famous chronicle writer, but also the history of, in Brazil's first few times when they won the World Cup wasn't on television, so you heard, the people followed the World Cup on the radio, and the radio commentators, there's a big tradition, which I guess is why Diego included the radio in his story, of listening to the radio, and the accounts were so amazing and creative and imaginative of what happened. But then when the tapes finally arrived a few days later, people were like, this is what happened on the radio. And Nelson Rodriguez says,
yes.
No, the radio was right, the TV images are wrong. And we were discussing this the other day with a guy who's sort of doing an academic thing, I suppose, about words and football, and he's a Brazilian guy, and he was saying one of the consequences then was these poor players who'd been sort of described doing these impossible tricks were then expected to do them in reality. And did that then contribute to their style of play because they had to try these things because the commentators had said they had? So that was the common idea is that samba and capoeira helped shape Brazilian football, but maybe the radio sort of creativity did, which might be why you can't write fiction about it if the game itself and the accounts are already
But it is true that sometimes when I'm watching a football game and it's like on World TV, one of the American channels, it's so boring to hear that. You know, it's just, you remember when we were talking about the commentator, it's like, man, this has to be special. It has to be because it's like that. I think Brazilians and Argentinians are for me the best when the commentators are not because it's.
Well, certainly translating the radio pieces from the radio sections. I didn't tune into 5 Live. I was much more thinking about North America's basketball. Slam dunk, you know, it's a lot more lively.
Well, for us Brazilians, that comes very funny when we listen to and watch Portuguese football matches, because for us Portuguese, like the English, the British English and American English. For us, the Portuguese, they have this power of turning everything banal in something very big. Also, the most stupid thing happening in the field, they make it like, and like Campones, poetry being, so it's very funny.
Great. We'll just have one last very quick question and then we really must finish.
Hi there, just got a quick question about the role of the World Cup and obviously the role of football in Latin American society. I guess I was first interested in this having read Eduardo Galeano's book, Football Outside Sombra, and having living in London as I do and seeing all the kind of press reports about the controversy of the World Cup and protests, and you often hear about the stadium not finished on time, this kind of thing. I was wondering what the sort of panel's insight was in terms of the role of the World Cup in Brazil. Is it something that you think is positive? Is it something that's good, or is it something that's a waste of public money?
Well, it remains to be seen, because, first of all, FIFA stuff is tax-free, so the money will be from tourism, will come from tourism. There is mixed feelings all around, and there is the real results, as every large-scale event like that will show up later, I guess. Because Brazil, it is what it is, basically a mess, a happy mess, a friendly mess, but a mess. It's not possible for the average Joe and Jane not to link the money spent there with the money not spent in public hospitals, public schools, public transportation, and so on. And there will be professional hellraisers, troublemakers, the so-called black blocs, storming the streets. Probably there will be some strikes. I mean, we have been having teachers strikes and bus drivers strikes and so on. It is true that some of this stuff is not ready, and it is true perhaps that we will rely on our sense of improvisation to overcome what's not going on according to plan. Some people say when the initial whistle is on, people will forget about everything, but some facts are very visible. Every World Cup, on every World Cup Eve, we would have the streets decorated, happily decorated for the event. Asphalt painting and flags and little things going on. Now we have something funnier. We have protest decoration. Streets with harsh words against the World Cup and the such. we could run a tournament, an international tournament, but not the World Cup. You know. Some stadiums, for instance, to become profitable, they will need like 1,000 years. You know, because we are not going to the stadiums anymore the way we used it to be. One of the reasons, corruption in football. Another reason, the best players are in Europe. In England, they are not there. People are kind of fed up with the whole old symbols of what it's like to be Brazilian, you know. In the past, and people are more aware, you know, when I was a young man, for instance, for you to have a housemate suing their bosses would be something that, you know, it would be like a Martian going to the beach, you know. Now it's common. The average poor person is not afraid of suing a telecom company, a former boss, and so on. So people have more, you know, people feel stronger now. And perhaps this sense of strength, this sense of empowerment that has to do with several factors that we will not be able to discuss here, give them certain distance from the World Cup itself as a phenomenon, as an economic event, but part of those people, they will perhaps cry if Brazil loses the final match, if we happen to reach it.
Thank you. I'm afraid we really must finish there.
Well, I just want to say one thing.
Okay.
Peru hasn't qualified to the World Cup since 1982. So that means that when I was a kid, and actually I don't remember, so I just wanted to know that. It's awful. I mean, I'm writing about football, and we suffer every 4 years. I had to spend a lot of money. When I was living in the United States, I went to Houston to watch the game, and we lost. And what I'm trying to say is that even though I don't think football exists anymore in my country, I'm still a big fan. And I suppose that's a problem, but I'm going to watch every game.
Thank you. So, just leave me to thank our panellists this evening, Diego Trelles Paz, Jethro Soutar, Toni Marques. Thank you all for coming. Please stick around, buy the books, have a drink with us, come and talk to us. We'll be here for a little bit. So just thank you all.
No, thank you.
Thank you.